Picture a street with no electricity, no streetlights, no glow from windows, just darkness so thick you feel it on your skin. Somewhere in that darkness, you hear singing. A procession is coming. If you hold fire, you join the celebration. If your flame is out, you are just another shadow as they walk past. To feel the weight of this story, we have to step into first-century Palestine. Jesus is sitting right here, on the Mount of Olives, just days before his crucifixion. His disciples have just asked him a massive question. What will the sign of your coming be? They expect a concrete prophetic timeline, talk of false prophets, wars, and earthquakes. Instead, Jesus answers with a love story about a midnight wedding procession. He describes 10 attendants waiting for the groom's arrival. For months or even years, these 10 people looked identical to anyone watching. The difference between the two groups remained entirely invisible during the day. It only became visible when the fire went out. That word ready is doing far more work than we usually give it credit for. The parable forces a different question. What are you carrying that nobody else can see? In the ancient Jewish world, a wedding happened in 3 stages: the engagement, the betrothal, and finally, the arrival. The groom would come to collect his bride, but the bride and her attendants never knew exactly when that would be. The father of the groom decided when the house was ready. Everyone else simply had to wait. When the groom finally came, it almost always happened at night. A procession would wind through the streets, and if you were part of the wedding party, you had to provide your own light for the journey. You had to be burning when the groom appeared. Look at this standard clay lamp. Your English translation probably says the 10 virgins took their lamps. The original Greek word here is lampas. It describes a massive torch, a wooden staff with oil-soaked rags wrapped around the top. The tiny oil reservoir of a small indoor clay lamp would be useless for a long night in the wind. Carrying a lampas blazing through the dark streets served a very specific purpose. It was a loud, public declaration that said, "I belong to this wedding." People often assume the foolish attendants fell asleep while the wise ones stayed awake. But the delay was so long and the night so dark that every single one of them eventually fell asleep. This cross-section shows the rapid oil consumption rate of a wooden torch. Jesus describes 5 attendants as phronimos. While we translate that as wise, the root implies a capacity for perception. A phronimos person plans for the crisis before it arrives. They understood the math of this diagram. A raging flame requires a secondary, separate flask of oil for a long duration. The other 5 were morose. They planned for convenience. They assumed the groom would arrive on their preferred schedule, so they brought their torches but neglected to bring any backup. During the ease of daylight, the wise and the foolish looked the same. Both groups carried identical staffs. It takes a crisis to reveal who actually has the fuel to last. At midnight, a raw, loud cry cuts through sleep. All 10 attendants wake up and begin to cosmeo their torches. They arrange them, trim the wicks, and try to make the flames beautiful for the procession. This is where the fault line appears. The foolish discover their torches are spendemi, actively being extinguished. The very flame that was supposed to mark them as members of the party is dying in their hands. They beg the wise for oil, and the wise say no. This isn't selfishness, it's honest math. Fire requires continual feeding, and if they split the supply, every single torch will go out before the procession reaches the house. This math points to a deeper requirement. In the book of Leviticus, priests were commanded to keep the lamps burning through a daily discipline of maintenance. They understood that fire cannot sustain itself. Because oil is the one thing that must be constantly replenished from an outside source, the biblical narrative uses it to represent the sustaining presence of God's Spirit. You can sit in a room full of people whose lamps are blazing and still find yourself in the dark. Their oil cannot be transferred to your vessel. Spiritual endurance is entirely personal. While the foolish run off to buy more oil, the bridegroom arrives. The wise enter the feast, and the door is closed decisively by someone with authority. When the foolish finally return and knock, the bridegroom responds, "I do not know you." He uses the Greek word oida. He isn't saying he lacks information about them. He is saying he does not recognize them as belonging to him, because they were not in the procession carrying fire. So, what do you carry into the dark? Not the last sermon you heard or a theological position you can articulate. When everything external is stripped away, what is it that fuels your fire when the night is longer than you planned for? The wise virgins weren't doing anything heroic. They simply planned honestly, recognizing that their flame was not self-sustaining. Wisdom begins with the daily admission that you need more oil than you can carry in yourself. The door is still open, and the oil is still being offered. But when the groom finally appears, only one question will matter. Is your torch still burning?